But I couldn't stay calm after such an unreasonable proposal, especially while grieving. How can we live there? We don't have any extra rooms in this apartment, do we? I questioned. Actually, one room in our apartment served as an office and storage for my husband's work stuff. Since we didn't have kids, he used it freely. We have that villa you inherited, he replied, smiling. I was shocked. Even though we had sold our family home, the villa held special memories for both my father and me. It was a place I wanted to keep as a tribute to him. But my husband didn't seem to care about my feelings and kept pushing for his own way. Living in that villa would be really tough for me, I tried to explain, but he didn't seem to listen. His parents had already ended their lease and decided to move into the villa. It seemed they had planned this during my father's funeral. Attracted by its space and peaceful location, their move was already in progress, and I felt like any objections I had would be pointless. Every time I tried to talk about my feelings, my husband would get annoyed. You're always thinking about yourself. You've been away from home so much because of your father's illness and those sudden emergencies. Do you realize how much I've had to put up with because of your obsession with your father? His words were harsh and unsympathetic, making my world even darker. Now that your father has passed, you should listen to me, he went on. It took him a whole year to die, which was way too long. His cold, heartless comments left me reeling. I didn't want to believe that this was who my husband truly was, but it was becoming painfully clear. He had little regard for my father or me. I remembered the pain on my father's face as he lay in the hospital bed. He would never have wanted me to abandon his memory just to obey my husband's insensitive demands. My husband's lack of empathy was crushing, and I felt more and more alone in my grief and in my battle to honor my father's legacy. In that moment, any love I had for my husband vanished. My heart ached as I considered his apparent excitement about gaining the villa while I was supposed to be grieving for my father. Despite the storm of emotions inside me, I kept my composure and cautioned him, "You may think living in the villa is a good idea now, but you might regret it later." He seemed determined, so reluctantly I agreed to his plan. Taking only a few essentials, I left our home. My husband looked puzzled by my sparse belongings, but I simply told him, "I'll get the rest later." Honestly, I had no desire to say another word to him. It hurt to face my in-laws, who seemed to have eagerly awaited my father's death and were now moving into the villa with enthusiasm. I followed my husband in silence. The one thing I couldn't bear was the thought of my beloved place being subject to his whims. The villa, a single-family home near the sea, sat in an average neighborhood but was still conveniently close to the city center. Its land held great value. Stepping out of the station, memories of my childhood flooded back. My mother was alive then, and I remembered my father carrying me home on his back after I fell asleep on the train. Arriving at the villa, I found my in-laws already inside. Suspicion crept in. It seemed my husband had secretly given them a key without telling me. This realization made me even more uneasy. The fact that my in-laws had planned their move without consulting anyone only added to my distrust. As I looked around, as I watched my in-laws, I could see the excitement in their eyes as they imagined their new life in our family home, the villa. It was filled with sturdy furniture carefully chosen by my father, with eclectic European-style furnishings likely picked out by my mother, each piece holding sentimental value. Yet they seemed oblivious to the true beauty of the villa. Isn't it perfect? Goodbye cramped apartment living. We're blessed to call this place home now, they exclaimed. The view from the second floor was truly breathtaking. It reminded me of my father's quiet pride in this special place, a stark contrast to my in-laws' insensitive excitement. Amid their excitement over what they dubbed the marvelous House of Secrets, my husband and his parents' enthusiastic comments only grated on my nerves. It seemed they were completely ignoring the emotional weight of my father's passing, treating the villa as nothing more than a fortunate inheritance. The location and the house are both flawless. We're lucky your father left us this magnificent villa. We owe him our thanks, my husband remarked thoughtlessly, sharing laughs with his parents as they cracked open beers to celebrate their new living situation. As I prepared snacks for them, cherished memories of moments spent with my parents around the dining table felt overshadowed and tainted by the current atmosphere. I chose to bury my emotions and soldier through the night. The next morning, the mood was abruptly shattered by my mother-in-law's piercing scream echoing through the villa. As I hurried to see what had happened, I found her on the bathroom floor, gripping her foot with a panicked expression. "The floor just gave way under me," she gasped, still shaken from the shock. My husband and father-in-law looked puzzled. "The floor seems fine. You probably just slipped," they suggested casually, rushing off her concerns. They examined the area she pointed to, but the floorboards appeared smooth and perfectly aligned. However, she insisted, "I'm certain the floor collapsed." As they continued their cursory inspection, I intervened. "Have you tried stepping on that slightly different colored part of the floor?" I asked, surprised. They all focused on the spot I indicated. Stepping forward, I pressed down on the discolored section with my slippered foot, and immediately the floorboard made a distinct sound and slightly sank. But the moment I lifted my foot, it snapped back into place. "What was that?" they exclaimed simultaneously. If someone stepped on it without knowing, they'd think the floor had collapsed. "Look, the floor sinks a bit." "It's like a trap," I clarified. "That's dangerous. Is there something wrong with this house?" They reacted, suddenly concerned. Their previous disregard for the sentimental value of the villa to me seemed momentarily forgotten as they faced the unexpected reality of its physical quirks. I calmly explained the situation, and they all looked at me with surprise and skepticism. "It's not a flaw," I assured them. "My father deliberately installed these features. This house is what you might call a mechanical mansion or a trick house." "Why would he do that?" they asked, perplexed. "Well, my father was a huge fan of ninjas. He invested a lot of time and money in this villa, which was not only his pride and joy, but also a showcase of his creativity," I explained. "As a child, I often came here while he worked on the house's mechanisms or added new ones. That's why the villa is full of traps and clever contraptions, like a shelf you shouldn't touch, a floorboard that drops when stepped on, a door that only opens in a specific sequence, hidden doors, and even secret rooms. This house is a reflection of my father's dreams and his inventive spirit developed over many years. Of course, this place is familiar to me, having visited since childhood and learned from my father how to navigate all these traps. I have no trouble with them. But it's a different story for my husband and in-laws who are unfamiliar with it. I warned you that living in this villa would be challenging." I also mentioned it's a place filled with my father's memories. My father's fascination with ninja gadgets was widely known among our relatives. What surprised me was that my husband and his parents had been oblivious to it. At first, my husband claimed he hadn't heard about it, but now he was speechless. My in-laws were equally taken aback by this revelation. With our apartment lease already canceled and nowhere else to go, they looked to my husband for guidance. Amid their confusion, both my father-in-law and husband accidentally triggered another trap, causing them to tumble. Seeing them sprawled on the ground, I couldn't help but chuckle. "Feel free to stay as long as you like," I said, my tone more sarcastic than sincere. They had been enchanted by the villa's luxury, ignoring my warnings and showing no interest in my father's hobbies. Now their oversight was catching up with them. Even my explanations about the trap dangers seemed to go unheard. "This won't be a problem. We'll adjust," my husband replied, trying to sound confident. I smiled knowingly, understanding his attempt but also aware of the challenges they would face in a house filled with my father's intricate contraptions. I informed them that I would return to the apartment to prepare for our move. However, my real intention was to stay behind. I needed some time alone to go through my father's belongings, finding comfort in the quiet. It gave me the space to gradually regain a sense of optimism and start envisioning my future. In just 2 days, my husband and in-laws had had enough of life in the villa. Meanwhile, my father's villa had become a minor attraction in the neighborhood. It was regularly featured in local newsletters as the trick mansion nestled in the residential area. Whenever the villa was occupied, curious locals and visitors, drawn by its reputation, would come to see the famous house. I remembered times when strangers toured the villa and local children played around it, bringing energy and liveliness to the place. My father had listed both the villa's and our former home's phone numbers in the newsletters. But now that the family home's number was inactive, any inquiries would be redirected to the villa's number. Thanks to my upbringing, I was fluent in foreign languages, which made it easy for me to handle calls from international visitors. However, my husband and in-laws struggled with this. They couldn't understand foreign languages and were already overwhelmed by the challenging lifestyle of navigating the house's many traps. Exhausted, sleep-deprived, and overwhelmed by the constant stream of unexpected visitors and challenging phone calls, they stumbled back to the apartment. "Why don't we all just live in this apartment together? Consider it," they suggested, desperate to escape the villa. They had eagerly anticipated inheriting the villa after my father's passing. But ironically, They couldn't handle living there for even 2 days. Instead of offering them tea, I handed my husband the divorce papers already filled out and stamped. There's no way we can live together. If you understand, please leave quickly, I explained with a heavy sigh. I couldn't forgive him for his insensitivity and the way he had dismissed my feelings without discussion or explanation. He had unilaterally decided we would live with his parents. He had never shared household responsibilities with me before and had comfortably left them all to me. During our time at the villa, I felt trapped and overwhelmed, yet he seemed completely indifferent to my struggles. Facing my husband and his parents in our apartment, I realized I couldn't continue living with someone so self-centered. His actions had spoken louder than any promises he could make. "What's going on? You used to love me, right?" he asked, puzzled by my cold demeanor. I couldn't help but scoff at his naive question. How can I love someone who secretly wished for my father's death and celebrated when he passed? I replied, my voice steady and unwavering. I handed him the divorce papers and firmly instructed all three of them to leave the apartment. "First of all, this is my apartment. If anyone should leave, it's you," I asserted. When my husband raised his voice, disregarding the disturbance it caused our neighbors, I reminded him calmly, "Victoria, I'll call the police for trespassing if you don't leave quietly. Remember, this apartment is in my name." They fell silent, realizing the seriousness of the situation. They had relied on me for financial support, and now, with little of their own, they faced a harsh reality. Determined to cut ties before they could start their lengthy persuasions, I watched them leave. Neither my husband nor my in-laws had much in savings. After being kicked out of the apartment and unable to return to the villa, they ended up in a cheap, low-quality apartment, struggling to get by. The old apartment was so much better, they often complained. Initially, my husband felt guilty and apologized repeatedly. However, as time passed, his guilt turned into resentment towards his parents. Because of their age, they didn't work much, and their attempts were short-lived. Eventually, they used up all their savings and pension. The constant arguments drove a wedge between them as a family. The thin walls of their new apartment barely contained their daily disagreements. Even when they received noise complaints, they refused to apologize. Instead, they responded with hostility, making themselves unpopular with the neighbors. It seemed inevitable, but they would have to find another place to live soon. My husband, who had once enjoyed the convenience of working from home, now found himself in a cramped space with no proper workspace. This severely impacted his ability to focus, and as a result, his reputation and sales suffered. He struggled to make ends meet with a late-night job at a convenience store and was considering taking on multiple part-time jobs just to get by. In moments of clarity, my in-laws realized that letting their son make decisions for them had been their biggest mistake. During their frequent arguments, they blamed the villa's traps and each other. "If you had been more responsible, we wouldn't be in this mess," they would argue, pointing fingers but never acknowledging their own roles in their downfall. After the divorce, my career as a product designer took a significant leap forward. To cope with the grief of my father's passing and the chaos that ensued, I poured my creativity into designing with a unique twist, incorporating ninja-inspired elements inspired by my father's interests. I shared these designs on social media, where they quickly gained popularity. To my surprise, a major cosmetics company reached out, intrigued by my designs. They wanted me to create packaging with an Asian flair, incorporating ninja themes. Embracing the project, I saw it as a way to honor my father's memory. It turned out to be a huge success, propelling my career to new heights. I found solace in sharing updates at my parents' graves, telling them about my achievements and how their legacy continued to inspire my work. I decided to keep the villa, transforming it into a unique mechanical house filled with memories of my father. I organized tours and made slight adjustments to ensure it was safe for visitors, allowing locals and tourists to explore and enjoy it for free. Before long, the house garnered significant media attention. The income from this exposure was invaluable, helping to cover its maintenance costs. Moreover, articles about the house were translated into different languages, garnering support from international fans, including elderly enthusiasts who shared my father's passion for ninjas. I devoted myself to maintaining this enchanting place. The mechanical house buzzed with activity, especially popular among local children. "Is this the famous mechanical house? Where are the tricks? Show us," they'd eagerly inquire. With the help of local volunteers, we ensured everyone could play safely. Foreign tourists, in particular, were captivated by features like the hidden floorboard and secret doors. While losing my father and the upheaval of inheriting the villa led to my divorce, the gains have outweighed the losses. The villa has evolved into a treasure trove of memories that I now share with loved ones and visitors alike. It has also sparked a personal transformation, propelling me forward with renewed optimism and hope.